meeting to order just so we can take roll call and get running before we have our first candidate at the door. So it is 5:27. I would like to call the meeting to order. Kelly Cassidy.
Mike Litt.
Here.
Julie O's.
Here.
Shelby Poole.
Here.
Ryan Sheik.
Here.
Jolene Squirtle. Here. Nicole Stevens. Here. Joe Valentine.
Here.
Patrick Bowman.
Here.
Jolene, you want to get the mission and vision for us?
Yes. The mission of WLA is to utilize leadership-based programs and strategies grounded in solid research, combined with the demonstrated success of core knowledge curriculum as a basis of a rigorous overall educational program that builds strong skills in math, reading, literature, writing, music, science, and technology. The vision of WLA is to be a school where students and graduates become exceptional leaders and are prepared to take on the academic and leadership challenges they will face in high school and beyond.
All right, under the direction of Mr. Bruce Miles, we will first interview Nick Rice for our executive director position. Is it an Energel Pentel? Because these are the top.
Pilot G2, which you got to
Not
go
as good,
7
not
zip
as
on.
good.
Those are nice.
What do you got?
The Pentel Energels.
I'm still rocking our PTO gifts from last Teacher's Day.
You are awesome.
I love it. I've got the orange
Is
one.
it a good pen?
Nobody else likes them.
So
They're like, oh,
people
Mr.
don't
Meyer,
know.
did you look? You
Yeah,
did so
dry
well.
The personalized.
I'm a lefty, so, you know.
Oh, gel ink is probably
It's a
tough
struggle.
for
Well,
you.
you do because you drag your hand
Yeah.
through everything you're writing and everything's
You
smeared.
need like fast draft.
That is, what kind is it?
Statistics
Oh, is this
require
the-
everybody else.
I didn't want to say it,
So
but
they say
that's,
about us
what
lefties.
I mean, that's
I don't
blatantly
think it's
honest.
Are you lefty too?
expensive.
We have two left-handed folks in our, that is wild.
But I also read that we're statistically slightly more likely to get hurt in some weird accident because we're looking the wrong direction.
Oh, tell me. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
So my grandpa was left-handed, but my dad was not, but he taught my dad how to do so many things. Like my dad shoots pool left-handed, he shoots a gun left-handed, he bowls left-handed, like he does so many things left-handed because that's how his dad taught him,
Yep.
but he's right-handed.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, my mother got deprogrammed in school.
Oh,
Oh, was she a lefty?
She was a lefty, but they
Oh.
tried to cure that.
My sister-in-law's parents would tie her left hand behind her back to eat dinner.
That's what they do now. Yeah.
Kind of abusive.
Right.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, how you doing? Nice.
Well, thank you. See you all.
Good to see you too.
I'm not sure if in-depth introductions are. I think he's a known quantity.
Yeah.
How'd the first session go?
Oh, I see.
It was great. For me
Yeah,
or for them?
Oh,
It was lovely. I stumbled over my words a little bit, but other than that, it went well.
not totally unanticipated. That happens to everybody.
Other than that, the speakers worked well. Everything was set up nicely, so
Great.
it seems in order.
The group knows you and you're known quantity, but why don't you take a couple minutes to tell us about you and
Yeah.
what you're up to?
Sure. My name is Nick Rice. I am currently the principal here at Woodbury Leadership Academy for grades 5 through 8. I have been working with young people for, I believe, about 22 years or so, maybe 23, in a variety of ways. I've worked in charter schools for about 16 years, I think, if I got my math down there. I have a master's degree in curriculum and instruction, and then I have a master's certificate in charter school leadership. I do not have an administrator's license, which I know is one of the requirements for this position. I currently am enrolled in a principal licensure program, so I'm about halfway complete with that program already, and I'll finish the next half within about 12 months. So I have class this winter, and then I'll be taking classes in the spring and the summer, and trying to get that wrapped up. So those are my goals. I've been working for a variety of charter schools, like I said, for a number of years now. I started off working for City Academy Charter School, which was the first charter school opened in the country, or the world, you could say. So that's in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I worked under the mentorship of Milo Cutter, who is the original founder of that school, and was named one of the 100 most influential educators in the 1990s. So that was a really amazing experience working with her. After that, I went to try to help start a charter school in northern Minnesota. It's called Vermilion Country School. So I was one of the first teachers hired at that school. I was on the original school board. The school opened in September. I moved up there in July. And so between July and September, we pretty much built the school, built the curriculum, built the policies, and really injected ourselves into the community. It was a pretty interesting and good learning experience for me, but I only stayed up there for 1 year. I came back down to the Twin Cities, where I started working for Cyber Village Academy, which is a charter school in St. Paul. We leased a building, but we later purchased a building in Minneapolis and moved the school. So I worked there as a science teacher, which is what I had been doing. I taught high school biology, chemistry, physics, environmental science, engineering. I also taught a small amount of middle school science as well. For, let's see, it would have been about 9-10 years before I moved into an administrative role at Cyber Village Academy. So I was hired as the assistant director of teaching and learning. So I was responsible for helping staff, teachers develop their curriculum, evaluations of staff, hiring of staff, but also primary discipline supervisor over students as well, and student culture at the school. So I did that position for 8 years, I think, before I started my role here at Woodbury Leadership Academy. So that was maybe more than you wanted.
I think it's fine, and the group should know that too. You've got a list of questions there right in front of you.
Yes, I do.
I'll ask questions, board members will do follow-ups. We're going to try and get the whole thing done in the allotted amount of time. Tell us about you've led your school to make academic achievement and student growth priority areas.
Tell us about how you led your district or school. Yeah. So I've done that. So at Cyber Village Academy, I was the assistant director of teaching and learning. So I did all teacher evaluations and direct supervision over the teaching staff. So that gave me a really great insight into what was happening in the classrooms, and also direct communication and feedback, coaching and tips and tricks, everything for my teaching staff. So I used the Charlotte Danielson rubric when I did that, which is a research-based rubric. And so just providing timely feedback for teachers. I also really led the initiative at the school to formalize our curriculum. So the curriculum, it was all teacher created, but with changing in staff, with just a school that was growing. The school added, it was a middle school that added high school and then added elementary school. There was just a lot of inconsistencies, a lot of broken systems. So I did a lot of work with the staff on, making sure we have syllabus for every class, making sure we have a scope and sequence for all of our curriculum, making sure that we are communicating across grade levels to know that our curriculum is aligning with one another. I also brought in other initiatives that led to academic gains, such as some of the school culture pieces that I brought in. So that school is approximately 50% of the students have some sort of individualized education plan. Some are IEPs or 504s. About 40% of the students have an IEP. So it was important that we work to keep students in classrooms, if that makes sense. So the student population that we had, just a lot of social emotional needs, anxiety needs, other mental health challenges, special education needs. And so a lot of the students that I worked with were unsuccessful in other places. But we put in some systems that helped students feel heard, feel supported. They knew that they had trusted adults in the building. We implemented some break spaces that were supervised by licensed EBD teachers. So students who were having trouble regulating themselves in class could go and get specific help on that re-regulation so that they're more quickly able to return to class, which leads to academic growth for young people.
Nicholas, check for follow-up questions here.
Yeah, go ahead.
What do you want to know more about? What else can he explain to you, whether it's at this school or another school, about academic achievement and student growth? What else do you want to know?
Just about that school, what was the student, how many population? Like how many people were at that school, roughly?
About 250, and then it grew to nearly 300 or so.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, I think when I left, it was 285 or something like that.
Thanks.
Yeah. That's a complex school, though. I always joke, I mean, a small school, but very complex. So that in particular school I had multiple programs. So I had a hybrid program where students were on campus 60% of the week, and 40% of the week they were off campus. And then I also had, and that was a model that we had before COVID. So that was our model, and it was successful. And then we also had a 100% online program. So there was complications with running a couple of separate programs.
So I may be parsing words here a little bit. If I am, call me on it. But I wrote down the school in Vermillion that I think the word you used, we tried to start it. Did it succeed?
Oh yeah, that school's still functioning.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
the school opened. It's challenging opening a school. So I could talk a lot about it, but we opened with about 75 students. The school year ended with about 60 students, so we lost students actually, which is not what you want. Right now, they're functioning with about 55 students, so it shrunk. So it was grades 7 through 12, and in a town of 450 people total in the town, so a small school. That town had lost their public school district, like a lot of the other small towns did, and it all consolidated into one humongous building, which just didn't work for everyone. And so the students that I was working with, their families wanted to stay in their community, and they wanted to have a smaller school experience. They wanted to have, it was a project-based school, so they wanted to have that type of education as well. But yeah, the school's still functioning.
Yeah, good. Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, the founding school board chairperson is still their chairperson, so it's nice. I get to connect with her every so often and see how things are going.
Other follow-ups?
The question mentions academic achievement. Can you list any growth and test scores?
Yeah,
Twice?
yeah, I can't, I don't think I can quote specific test data points. So we are looking, what I did more with that school is, I want to say individual student growth, okay? So one of the most challenging things, if we're looking straight at like MCA scores, for example.
Which is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, right. So I don't like to use the MCA scores to talk about whether that school is successful or not. And the reason for that is because the participation rate is low and that is because of specific mental health needs and anxiety. The students are able to opt out of MCA testing. So whenever a student or family chooses to not participate in MCA testing, that student is counted as not meets. And so, so when you get your testing data that comes back to you, you know, what we want to see is that our students are meeting and exceeding standards, right? But if a student does not ever take the test at all, they are counted as does not meet. And so that was a huge challenge. But our high school students, my high school students, earned higher than average ACT test scores. So again, I don't feel comfortable quoting a number because I don't have it memorized. But our average was above 25, if I remember right, on the ACT, and I believe the national average is somewhere around 22, 23.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah. Need to jump into question 2 here, just out of time. What steps have you taken to successfully communicate with multiple stakeholders and talk to us specifically about how you communicate with employees?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So communicating with stakeholders is obviously critically important. The school leaders have to be able to connect with everybody, which is one of my strengths. I'm gonna struggle to prove it to you. However, I'm a person who, thank you. I'm a person who is out and visible in the school. I stand out in the front and I greet parents by name when they come in. I'm struggling to do that at Woodbury Leadership Academy because I haven't learned their names just yet. In my previous schools, I knew the vast majority of the parents' names and all the children. So, it's just really important for me to be out, talking to people, engaging with everyone who's coming in and out of the building. I've also set up like community events for schools. I've done a variety, like 5K races. I did a community fair for City Academy in St. Paul, where we had vendors from different local businesses and nonprofits come to the school. We did a fair where community members came to tour the school, walk around, and connect with those vendors. I've often done community events where I'm inviting, like we would have school carnivals and we invite local community members. I've had my students make and hand deliver like little invites to the houses around my schools, invite community members in. And then in terms of employees, it's similar. So what I like to do is make sure that I'm out in the school, walking around, talking to as many people as possible. I try to build relationships with just a large variety of the staff in the school. I build close relationships with every level of staff in the school. So there's the way I operate isn't hierarchical. I like to think that we each have a job and they're each equally important and there's not one over the other. But along those lines, again, like I'm saying, I just like to connect with staff and just have conversations. So my communication style, honestly, I like written communication, which I know a lot of the staff here at WLA do not prefer. But also, like I mentioned, I worked 8 years or nine years previously at a school that had a fully online program. So I was working with clients that didn't necessarily want to come into the building, and so email was always the top form of communication for me there. Part of why I like email is I just like to have it written down so that it's my record, I can print that and file it. I can go back to it later. But that's like work communication. But like I said, that has to be partnered with going around and having individual conversations with people. I also will lead team meetings. I call and lead team meetings with staff. So that's usually the best way for a group of staff to problem solve or get down to whatever the issue is quickly. Have a team meeting, things like that. So that's my style.
Follow-ups? We're rolling. Thanks, Nick. Question 3, tell us about your efforts to develop and maintain a healthy fund balance. What's worked, and where have your efforts, what have you learned from?
Yeah, I've always been lucky, I guess, to have functional schools that are successful and are growing. I've almost always had a comfortable fund balance. So I can talk about that, certainly. So I was on the Vermilion Country School Board as a board member for a year. That was during their initial first year of operation. Y'all as a school board might appreciate this, but we met every week and we had usually 4 to 5 hour long board meetings because we were writing the salary schedules, we were writing the policies, we were writing the teacher evaluation for salary increases next year. None of it existed. So, spent a lot of time working with that group as a team to kind of go through that process. At Cyber Village Academy, I was an ex aficionado, so I attended all school board meetings, but I wasn't a voting school board member. But I did present on the curriculum instruction that was happening in school, and then I was at every school board meeting over that 8-year period, or I would say the vast majority. I missed a few. I was at the vast majority of those school board meetings and having those budget discussions regularly. It's hard for me to remember, so y'all could probably help me out, but I've worked in charter schools during 2 recessions. And I mean, one was the housing crash. One was, I think it was like after 9/11. It's hard for me to remember what caused these, but so I worked at City Academy and then Cyber Village Academy when both times where we as a school had to say, our funding is shrinking and there is holdbacks on the other funds that we have. And so what are we going to do? And we found, strategic solutions to those in a variety of ways. I voluntarily took a salary decrease when I was assistant director of Cyber Village Academy. And by doing that, it allowed us to keep a teacher who we were otherwise going to have to let go. In terms of fund balance, the school boards that I've worked with have always maintained a healthy fund balance, so I've never felt like we were in any sort of danger. But like I'm saying, when the revenue stream was shrinking, we did have to make adjustments to ensure that we didn't have to draw anything out of our fund balance. What has worked? Efforts less successful. Follow-ups on that. I feel like I have a lot more to say, but I can't think of what it is.
Follow-ups?
Go ahead.
Sure, yeah, so having lived through and worked through some of those tough times, getting a time machine and go back, what are some things that you would do over and things that you've learned? So now that you can kind of go back in time and fix your mistake, what would that be?
Yeah, I think what happened for me in 2 different situations was growing too fast and not being prepared for that. So when our school, took on a lot of enrollment increase.
At Cyber?
At Cyber Village Academy.
Okay, thanks.
We took on enrollment increase, but we didn't strategically hire our behavior support for that. And so that's something that I would like to, I definitely would have done differently, is if we're, if we're growing students, you might be high-fiving each other that your fund balance is going up so high, but also I like to think, like, how are we injecting those resources back to our students? What are the needs? If it's increasing the class sizes, but then not having the supports for the students available, that's what led to some loss of enrollment then the next year. Our enrollment went down. So after that, we did make some of the stuff I think I already described, and I described in the gym, so y'all didn't get to hear it, but some of the culture pieces that we put into place after that to help support the students more.
Cool. Let's jump ahead. Describe a time when a decision was made by the school board you did not agree with. How'd you handle it? How'd you move forward? And don't be telling us there's never been a board meeting. Just kidding.
Yeah, no, honestly, you see me shaking my head right away. Okay, I got one. Thank you. So here's the straight truth. I have worked with extremely functional school boards, and they have done great work running the school. And I always think that the school board is my boss, as an administrator in the school. So I kind of think of it that way. Like I already mentioned, at my previous position where I was the assistant director, I was at every board meeting, and we were a team. We always were working together. There certainly could be disagreement, but I honestly cannot think of an answer to this. However, when I was at Vermilion Country School, that was extremely dysfunctional school board. And there was a variety of things happening there. Part of it was, I should just I gotta slow my roll here. Part of it was, there were a lot of really great, well-intended community members who wanted to be on the school board of this very small town, very cute little school that was popping up, and they just wanted to be a part of that, which is really great. It's support from the community. However, they had absolutely no experience and no idea on how to run a school and how to run a school board, and so it was pushing past what color should we paint the wall, because we have not yet written any of our policies yet. So it was, just interesting things like that.
So Nick, how do you gently help a board stay in their lane?
Yeah, which is important.
Can you give an example of where you've really had to kind of move a board away from picking the paint color to taking care of some curriculum?
Yeah. Well, and even curriculum, I like to leave that to the experts on choosing specific curriculum, even though our school board, is certainly for core knowledge. But yeah, absolutely. So it is important to have the individual conversation with board members. We had to have some tough conversations about you were on the startup board, but now we're an operational board, and we need to make some changes. And how do we make sure we have enough teachers on our board? Do we want that to be a majority? Should we change, some of what the board bylaws are saying? Those types of conversations happened. But it was, I would do it differently now. I mean, how it happened then were very long conversations. But now I think what I would do is really, it has to be direct, one-on-one conversations, direct with board members, and letting them know, going through, all of our board members have board training, so you can easily fall back on that and go back to, what are the basic functions of a school board, and just really giving that education. I'm sure this school board has trainers that come in and train you all at once some of the time, and then each new board member has to go to board training. So sometimes it's bringing someone in to explain that, but other times it's let's get back to the MDE board training. That list of essential board functions.
Thanks. Follow-ups.
So full transparency for you, if there was something you're really passionate about that the board did not support you on, how would you handle that? How would you internalize that, and how would you handle
I would cry on my drive home. No, I don't play like that, honestly. I'm part of a team. I'm part of a school that's not about me. It's about us. You want transparency? Okay. So I was in this room presenting on the high school expansion. And I presented an idea where I talked about a hybrid schedule where our students would have study lab on Friday. I was shocked that I didn't receive pushback from the school board on that.
Sure, okay.
And I was actually quite surprised that that didn't launch us into a long discussion.
Yeah.
I expected that, and I walked out of that meeting going, either they weren't listening or they're on board with it, I guess.
Right.
I'm just kidding about the listening.
Yeah.
Open-minded.
There you go.
You know, I wasn't sure, but that's what I expected. I expected to have a robust discussion on the pros and cons of that model, and I thought we were going to hash it out. So, yeah. But like I said, the school board is my boss. However, the school board is expecting that I, as a school leader, am providing the guidance and the knowledge, you know, since I spent all that time studying it, that I'm bringing that to our board meetings, and I'm advising the school board on how to make sound decisions for the school. But then, honestly, I like to hear what the group has to say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's jump to question 5. What have you done to develop a healthy culture? You've already touched on visible presence. If you want to bring that up again, you can. But I think we know about that piece, how important it is to you. But talk about developing healthy culture in schools.
Yeah. A program that I put into place at my last school was restorative practices in the circle process. Every day we are all part of a healthy school culture. But I put those programs into place specifically to alter the culture. So I was seeing a disciplinary style culture, a lot of suspensions, a lot of arguing, student arguments, and that's anecdotal, but when we're talking to a student about anything that's happening in class, and then I'm observing students building walls to that communication with their teachers, that was where I really saw a culture breakdown. So restorative practices in the circle process is really about relationship building and about communication. It's about listening to one another. So what I did was I introduced that idea. I first had my behavior intervention team trained in restorative practices. I had the admin team trained formally at Minnesota Department of Education in restorative practices. Then I had some strategic teachers trained formally. That allowed us to really bring that as informal training to the rest of the teaching staff over a couple-year period. So all classes were using circles as a way to listen to young people speak. And so once we kind of had that established, we really shifted our discipline model to be more about repair of harm than it is about exclusion. And by exclusion, I mean suspending students from school or kicking them out or things like that. So the change, so I don't have numbers, Julie. But the suspension rates drastically reduced. But that's not the culture that I'm talking about. The culture that I'm talking about is positive communication that was happening between students and staff and between staff and staff. I had even our lunch and our office administration staff trained in these processes. So we were able to resolve conflicts more quickly, I believe, because of this. We learned restorative chat procedures. So we were teaching students how to connect and talk through what their issues are and their concerns are in a specific process. And so that they could move on with their lives and not hold on to that conflict for so long. So the culture really shifted, I'm talking about a 7-year process. But the culture really shifted a lot, and the relationships, there was just these very deep relationships between students and staff, a lot of trust with families. So I started also bringing families in to engage in these same activities. We would do listening sessions, I call them, but inviting families in to just sit and talk, and we would eat food together and say so what are you seeing or what are you experiencing? Or I'd have topics that we would go through, but yeah, it really created a lot of trust.
Follow-ups, board?
If you could speak to things that you've done here in your current role, or however many months in, what kind of things have you started to try and do to change the culture here or to make a difference here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I've been here since working with the students since September. So some of the things that I've implemented so far, procedures for students in the hallways, procedures for students, how they're entering and exiting classrooms. So I've been working with middle school teachers on how they're starting class, how they're greeting students, having teachers visible at the door, talking to students as they're coming in and out of the hallway. I've asked that students aren't working in unsupervised classrooms with no adults in them, which was happening, so that was a change. I've been it's not where I want it yet, but we're starting to implement a intervention space called the Green Room. In my previous experience, I created a space in school called the Green Room, which was really an intervention space. So like I mentioned, students were able to go in there and get the services that they needed and the skills that they were missing to be more successful in their classes. So that's something, that idea I brought here. Right now it's not functioning the way that I would like it to in the end, which is right now it's really a disciplinary room. But the students who are going there for discipline are not getting the skills that they're missing to be successful in class. So that's why I'd like to see that shift. Another thing I want us to start doing is a little bit more like new teacher mentoring and some peer observations, which I haven't implemented yet, but I would like to. So I just want to see, I'd like to create a peer observation process that goes with mentoring. That would be stipend based, so staff would be paid for that. But there would be teachers that are using rubrics to observe their coworkers in their instruction in class, and provide them tips, tricks, and feedback along that. But I think you could see positive gains in the specific teaching practices, but also it's a culture piece. Getting staff connected with one another, learning from one another, and it can take a little bit of feedback that is less threatening, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Because I give a lot of feedback to people, but I'm their supervisor. Mm-hmm. And when you get feedback from a peer, you can digest it in a different way. Those are some of the things.
Yeah.
So knowing the school, culture is a really big, I'm really passionate about culture.
Yeah.
I think it's really, really important. I guess if, try to finish this statement, like what's a really important element of a healthy culture to you? Like, maybe finish, I would like to have Woodbury Leadership Academy be a place where people blank, or be a place where blank. Because, I mean, you're going to be the executive director if you get the position.
Yeah.
Like, what is that you want to create? What's important to your culture?
Yeah, I want to create a culture where everyone is accepted.
Okay.
Yeah, where all students are accepted. They feel like they can be themselves. They can come into the space and be successful, being who they are, which is a challenge because we got things like school uniforms, which I love. Okay? But when you're wearing a school uniform, it's hard to express yourself. So students are finding other ways to do that. I want to see a lot more work go into our advisory. So advisory is a time where our teachers are working with the students, but they're not focused on core academics. So we can take a break from math for a minute and let's talk about other things. Let's talk about what's going on in your lives. Let's talk about what are the controversial topics that are happening out in the world. How are we feeling and responding to that? So social emotional learning, all that type of thing. So the work that's done in advisory is just so critical to building the student culture and to get students to understand how they can express themselves without spray painting a wall or something like that, because there's a lot of ways to do it, and if we're not doing it with our dress, how do we do it? And so setting up a framework for that, because young people they just haven't had the experience to know how to do that, especially like 7th and 8th grade is they're changing and their minds are changing. And they're feeling peer pressure, and they're feeling like things have to be a certain way, and I have to look a certain way, which is not true. You should be who you are, student, right? And we're here to accept you for who you are, but that there takes confidence there too, which is also part of this like social emotional learning that I'm describing.
Let's jump to number 6. I think we've got about 10 or 15 minutes for these last 3 questions.
Okay.
On 6, you've actually kind of talked a little bit about this, kind of led up to it. But what have you successfully done to organize your efforts to include other employees and community members to collaborate?
Organize my efforts to include other school employees.
You've already made it clear that you're not a hierarchical guy that way.
Mm-hmm.
But give us some examples of places where you've been able to bring people together to really work to collaborate for some student success or program success.
Sure. Yeah. I've done that in a variety of ways. So I always partner, every school I've worked in, I partner with different community organizations to get what we can to benefit our student learning. But there's a few that I'm thinking of that are different than that. So a few times I have done very specific partnerships with organizations to specifically improve something at school. So for example, I partnered with Janet Christensen, who works for the Minnesota Department of Education. She is the PBIS coordinator for MDE. She worked with myself and a couple other staff on our school. I've never worked for a PBIS school. However, we partnered with her to get strategies, positive behavior intervention systems.
At Cyber.
Sorry.
At Cyber, right?
Right.
Okay, thanks.
And so at Cyber Village Academy, so I partnered with her over a year period, excuse me, where she came in once a month. We worked for about 3 or 4 hours together in a small team, and she helped introduce strategies, ideas from the state. She brought in a tool called the Tiered Fidelity Inventory, where we were evaluating different systems and programs that are in place at the school and looking at whether we're implementing those with fidelity. I'm currently working with Ann Mitchell of the Minnesota Department of Education. She is the coordinator of, don't remember, outreach administrative licensing. So she works with, she has a mentorship group that I'm a part of that is for new young school administrators. So I participate in that once a month. We are a group that get together. We just share ideas. What's going on in your school? What's going on in yours? And, how'd you solve it? How'd you, kind of thing. The support group like that. I partnered with Nancy Riestenberg, who does she's the director of restorative justice for the Minnesota Department of Education. And she also works for another organization I can't remember the name of. So I've done specific partnerships with her where I've gone and met with her, and then I've invited her to come and train my staff in past schools. And then I still talk to her, so I have some staff here that are going to train with her in February. I partnered with other charter schools over the years in a variety of ways. We did high school prom with Blue Sky Online, so VOA school. Wait, are they? Are they a VOA school? They might be. Volunteers of America, who is our authorizer, I think also authorizes Blue Sky Online, but I can't remember now. They have a small online school. I used to work for a small online school. We wanted to have prom, and so we did it together, because you don't want to have only 15 kids at prom. You want 15 and 15, now you got 30. There's a little more than that, I'm just kidding. But things like that over the years. Lots of other ones I can't think of.
Let's look for follow-ups on
Yeah,
that.
I've got a quick one. One of my favorite bosses in my past would say was, Mike, you manage stuff and you lead people.
Yeah.
So talk to me a bit about leadership. And what do you bring to the table that you think makes people want to follow you?
Yeah, right. So my quote that I like along that lines is a leader is a person who sits in an office and has a title, but if you want to lead people, you need to inspire them. Okay? So that's how I see it. Is this job is not someone who sits in an office and sends out memos. This job is someone who is out walking around on the ground, talking to people on a daily basis. It's all about communication. It's about sharing my passion and vision for success in a way that is digestible. And that can sound cynical, but I don't think that it is. And what I really mean by that is implementation science. So it can't, staff have to have ideas introduced, and then how about you work in a small group and your small group choose on that idea and give me some feedback for how I can change my approach. And then once I have your feedback, I could send it over to this group and see what they think about it. And so that's how I like to go about things. So if you want to implement a new program, new strategy, it can be really challenging to just show up one day and say this is what we're going to do, because you can predict the certain percentage of people are going to push back on that. So it's how you're leading, inspiring, and getting people motivated and interested to follow along with that. Yeah, it takes time.
Just to piggyback on that, what do you think is the most important aspect of a leader? What do you value the most that you think leaders possess? What's most important?
A good solid tie.
It's, yeah.
Extra credit
I'm
right
just
there. Well done.
It's like, God, the most important.
Yeah,
All right,
or-
that's tough.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody that you like
It's temperament, really, which is like a variety of things. So it's like being calm, almost always calm. There's a lot of things that happen in a school every single day, and everyone, I shouldn't say that, a lot of people want to panic and jump to conclusions, and that's not wise. So being calm, having that ability to listen to people and try to hear. So hear what people's needs are, and then you have to, like, how can you strategically meet as much needs as possible? I think trust, actually. You know, it's all like personality, you know? But I think trust is really big. So what I like to do is provide a framework, provide expectations, give staff the training that they need, and then provide staff with autonomy to make decisions and to run their job, run their classroom. I always have a process for observing and evaluating to know that it's working up to standard, but not micromanaging, you know, and I think that builds trust. And when you have trust, your employees end up, they take so much more ownership over their jobs, which is just leads to such better outcomes. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Let's jump ahead to number 7. What have you done to maintain communication with board members between board meetings?
Not much. At this school, not much. I've been needing to get myself in the school board meetings more often. I've been like, I started a new job here, and then I've been trying to get myself to a place where I'm at the school board level, which I haven't gotten to yet, because I'm trying to make some changes, you know, in the classrooms and in the hallways. In the past, I've always been a very intricate member of the school board. I communicate with, in my previous experiences, Cyber Village Academy, we'll talk about, you know, where I was assistant director. I had very close relationships and personal relationships with school board members. You know, they're all people that would come to me on a very regular basis. You know, it was a small school, so like I mentioned, you know, I get to know everybody. I think y'all read through some of my materials that I prepared. I think I had some board members on there. Just at least sort of lets you know that level of trust and communication that I have with them. Yeah, I don't think I don't know if I'm answering your question very effectively, but basically, like, it's no different than building my relationships with everyone else in the school. It's extremely important to have great relationships with your school board members. Yeah, I mean, I'll stop there.
Follow-ups?
Ice fish?
No. No.
Let's jump to
I ice skate.
let's jump to number 8, Nick.
Yeah.
What would be your personal and professional goals for the first 12 months? Thinking about this from July 1 on.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know, some of the things that I want to start with, we got a high school to build. So there's a lot of work that's going to happen there. We got to get some great staff in place. we need to secure our building for our future expansion. Critically important. So there's a lot of work that has to happen there. But otherwise, I mean, I'm thinking of just like school culture, student culture, staff. There's a lot of systems that I'd like to think about how we can improve or put in place. So, some things I've talked about, like, how can we improve our staff culture? How can we improve our teaching practices? One thing, like I mentioned, I'd like to do some peer observations and mentoring through that. I do want to I would like us to have a specific program for how we're addressing student behavior and social emotional needs. We're a responsive classroom school, and I really like responsive classroom, which is it's an approach to teaching, it's a way of teaching, but it's also not getting our students hitting some of their needs that are missing. It's great for our approach to classroom management. It does set up positive relationships with students, but I think we need to build our capacity to work specifically on student mental health. So that might be like adding a school social worker, adding some, like I mentioned, more social emotional learning. I want to spend a lot of time thinking about advisory and how we can improve that. I want us to, I know it's something we've done in the past, but it is not happening right now this year, is I'd like to see us doing like some more school assemblies with students to celebrate the student success, to recognize positive behaviors, positive leadership in the school. Plus sometimes it's just fun. I do want us to shift away from our disciplinary model of, we have a suspension-focused disciplinary model. I just would like to see that shift more to a preventative and repair model. I want us to add athletics formally, not just volunteer club athletics, but formal clubs and athletics that happen after school, so that our students can compete against other local schools. It's going to be, I think, a big driver in some of our enrollment numbers as we move up into high school. We want to continue to build enrollment in the middle school. Those things are really important for the student culture, but also just individual families have value there. I mentioned systems, but it's just there's a few systems in the school that just need attention. For example, if a new student wanted to start tomorrow, what is the process for that? We don't have a formal process that's written down. We have great staff that do great work. However, if one of them was sick, now what are we going to do? So systems in place where we know what the backups are, things like that. Those are some of the first things I want to get implemented.
Board follow-ups to that question?
If you had to pick a top three, since that was a lot.
Oh.
If you had to pick what are your top three that you're most passionate about to implement right after that?
Well, we got to get the high school rolling.
Yep.
So that's super important, and we need a building. That's all one thing. The high school with the building.
We'll count it as one.
Yeah, we'll count that as one. And then adjustments to our disciplinary approach. And then I want to hire an athletic director. But there'll probably be activities / athletics, and then hopefully we can continue to grow and have a need for more than that. But
Got one
question, kind of to piggyback off that. Have you, at any of the past schools with the, hiring the athletic director, building an athletic program? Because that'd be a beautiful gym we have. It'd be awesome if kids had a basketball team and played other charter schools. Is that something you've done before, had experience with, or?
No.
Okay.
My experience is kind of similar to here. So this is actually the largest school that I've worked at. So my experience is more ground level. So I have added clubs, added activities to my schools. We have archery going on here. At my last school, I brought archery program to the school, so I had to do grant writing and fundraising for that. And so I've brought in like club sports and activities, but no, I've not led us like a large, effort to add team sports. I have other experience more, like I said, at the ground level with athletics. So I coach myself. I coach hockey right now. I've also done volleyball and baseball and soccer and a million other things. But I am very deeply embedded into our hockey association, so I get to kind of see how it's run and how things operate. And I've worked at the coach level, but not on a program administration level.
Nick, well done.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Nick.
It didn't go very well in the gym, so.
Board member, we'll take about a 10, 15-minute break, let you just, take some reflection time, get more food if you need it, we'll take it from there.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Nice house.
I noticed it,
Yes,
it
right
was
away.
obvious.
Yep,
Thanks, Jolene.
well done.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I love it.
I think you're-
No, I heard you.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Jonas. Does anyone know how to say this last name?
Ooh, Bugan. I asked him.
Bugan.
I think
Bugan.
you were ready for that question.
No,
I asked him
nicely
right
done.
away. I was like, what do you say?
You always walk around with those?
These,
Yeah.
when you're around.
What is it?
Handcuffs.
Oh.
Never know.
Heard stories about you.
That's funny.
Yeah. He should be walking home, but we'll meet him in the middle.
Yeah, I wear certain things all the time. I'm always on call, so.
Yeah.
Oh, this still says 7:30 to 8:15. Not. So we'll get
Just wanted
started
to
at
show it to a scene.
6:45.
You're missing cuffs and your gun and everything
Well, that
else.
doesn't
Like, oh.
Thank you. I'll get a second water bottle.
Yes.
Jonas, we're glad you're here.
Thank you, I'm very glad to be here.
Welcome.
I just want to.
See, I'm just taking some notes. There's a timeline on top of the question sheet, and I wrote down the change, and I put 6:45 to 7:30. That's rough. I'm gonna run the questions. Board members can do follow-ups. Why don't you go ahead with the introduction?
Yeah, I'm Jonas. Bugan is how you pronounce it. I hear that's been a question around here, so Bugan it is. And
Do you want me to hand those out?
Yeah, that'd be great if we could have one for each board member. It's what I have a few additional materials for you.
Ask a question, I can grab it to them right here.
And just in case you want to look at them, I'll give you a little context. So as charter school boards have teachers and parents on them, I went back and looked at some of the old letters I had from teachers and parents that weren't part of my letters and asked for a couple more on Monday to be written, so there's a few current ones. I just think that is helpful from that perspective to see what teachers and parents I've worked with before had to say. And the very top document is if there's any questions on here in budget, I'll explain that to you then, what I did there. But it's related to budget, so I can't either. I need my reading glasses.
You can borrow mine.
Okay.
So let me get started. Tell us about how you've led your school to make academic achievement and student growth into priority areas.
Okay, great question. So my school, I talked about this with the last group. We, at the end of my first year, really when I started where I'm at now, the school had been open for 2 years, and the founding director, it was kind of like the start of Woodbury Leadership Academy, as I understand it. Was rough. The founding director left in the middle of the previous year. They had figured out that one of the big mistakes they had made was the location of the school. They were a replica school of Global Academy, and Global was located in Columbia Heights, and they located the school in St. Paul. And so the hundreds of kids on the waiting list at Global weren't interested in going to St. Paul. This was one of the mistakes that they had made. So they were in the process, they had identified a site actually in Columbia Heights, and we're going to be moving on July 1st. I started June 1st, but when I started on June 1st, only about 30 to 40 of the students were planning to follow to the new location, and all but about 2 of the teachers had taken other jobs. So I started on June 1st with basically no students, no staff, and no building, and opening school in August. It was our starting point, just for a little context. So first year was rough. This is my 7th year. We've had 2 rough years. It was the first year was rough, and like everybody else, the first year after COVID was rough. And doubly rough for us because in addition to all the reasons that schools struggled after COVID, this brilliant guy here thought it would be a good idea to move buildings in the middle of COVID when we were doing that. And so we were moving to a new location. So we came back from COVID. We had moved again. We'd outgrown our other space. And we were trying to increase our diversity and move to a location that would support that. And it turned out to be a good decision, but it made the first year back from COVID even more difficult. And I laid that out for context, that near the end of the spring of the first year, it was, okay, we've got to improve our academic results, and we've got to improve what's happening. You know, it was rough in a lot of ways, behavior was rough, but the academics weren't where we needed them either. And so we formed what we ended up calling our strategic directions team. And we changed our daily schedule to match a schedule that a lot of charter schools out east use, where they have a longer school day Monday through Thursday, and then a shorter day on Friday. And we did that for a variety of reasons, but we had every Friday afternoon where our staff had 2 hours together. Now, I know meeting on Friday afternoon sounds not all that exciting, but when you only have a half day on Friday, you actually are more energized than you would be after Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday after a full day of work. So it actually worked out really well that way. And so we committed to, outside of workshop week, doing all of our professional development, all of our PLC, all of our academic work, everything during that time on Friday afternoons. Okay? And because of that, we don't have really any professional development days during the year. I think the only one we have is the day after winter break, which lets us end the school year a little earlier, right? Because we can get all the PD we need in on Fridays. And so we set up structures and systems around that, whether we would break the 2 hours into staff meeting time and SDT time. And basically, most week it's like 90 to 100 minutes of SDT and 20 to 30 minutes of staff meeting time. Staff meeting time is anything that is not directly about academics, right? And most of the things that are not directly about academics and improving, our academics in our school, we fit into the little bit of time that whatever I need that week we do, and the rest is for SDT when we plan. But once in a while, we'll take an hour to prepare for conferences, or an hour to work on report cards or something, and have a shorter SDT. But usually, I try and keep in the weekly newsletter, called News and Notes, I send every Sunday night, keep the things that really don't need to be in the meeting. So with that, we try to set up a system where, as a whole staff, and mind you, I'm well aware that different size schools have very different contexts. I've led in lots of different size schools. So it may not work to do the same thing with the entire staff the same way here, for example, but where it's many, many more staff members than where we're at right now. But we have the entire licensed staff, and it's a time where PLC work happens, but it's a time where we set what our priorities are that we're gonna work on during the year. And we try and keep it to 1, 2, or 3 priorities. And the priorities in SDT then become also the priorities for our budget, in terms of what we're gonna budget that year. They become the priorities for our staff development time during workshop week that we do have. And really where you spend your time and your money is where your priorities are. And so we try and keep them concise enough. Last year, well, after COVID, we had the drop that everybody else had. We had shown really great growth before COVID, particularly with a population that is, over 60% English learners and over 95% free reduced lunch. So, yeah, the test scores aren't the same as Woodbury Leadership Academies, but when you look at free reduced lunch students and English learners and all the different subcategories, we were doing really well, and our growth is pretty amazing before COVID. Dropped the year after COVID, like everybody else's did. And so, but during that year, the year we came back, and that first year in the new building, as we were struggling to some degree, we used that time during SDT to really talk about, we were implementing a new science curriculum that year as well, but to really talk about what is happening and what's going on, what are our priorities going to be for the next year. And we had an academic piece, and we had I'll call it social, emotional, behavioral piece. And so we really identified that we are going to school-wide emphasize responsive classroom in everything we do. Now, I know RC is a piece here, but what we needed at that point was something to give us all a common focus, a common language, a common way of thinking about things. And we budgeted the money and we did what we had to do to move things around so that we could send every staff member to the full 4-day RC training that summer. And coming back, when we had workshop, we also, and the staff agreed this was needed, we extended how many days of workshop we were gonna have, because we felt like we needed more to do it. And we read then during workshop week, after everybody had had RC training, we had a book that we purchased, which I can't remember the title. I should have looked at this, but it's something about discipline from RC. Discipline is in the title, I think. And each day we read a chapter, a different staff member led. The first day of workshop, I led everything. And we modeled morning meeting and doing all 4 parts of morning meeting. And I modeled interactive modeling and using teacher language and the kind of key components of a responsive classroom, which is nothing magic. I mean, those of you that use it, but it's been around forever. It's good stuff. If you do it with fidelity, it works for the most part. And just
Let's take a minute and let the board think about some follow-up questions for you.
Good.
And I didn't do my job very well at the beginning. We've got roughly 5 minutes for each question to get you rolling. And I do want the board to have a chance to follow up. So let me do a little editorial work there. Sorry.
Good work, and thank you. I will tell you that one of the key components with our board chair is I tell him when I start rambling, cut me off. And we have that relationship. So I appreciate you doing the work as the board chair. I'm well aware of that professional growth goal.
But I'm bringing it to the dance.
Yeah, thank you.
Board, a lot of information there. Follow-up questions.
With the schedule change, tell me about the process you used to convince people that was a good idea, including the teachers, including the parents, everybody, all the stakeholders.
Well, in that particular case, we started by saying we're considering this, sent a survey home to all the families, did a survey with the staff and staff meeting, and there was, almost everybody was on board, so it didn't take much convincing. So I guess we were lucky in that regard. So I guess that would be the answer. I know it's not a good process like you maybe want to hear about, but that's what the reality was.
Yeah, it's
Good answer, yeah.
the truth will set you free.
Yeah.
Other things you'd like to know about that? We're moving.
Okay.
What steps have you taken to successfully communicate with multiple stakeholders? And give us some time specific on talking and communicating with employees.
Well, I'll start with the second part, since you're asking specifically about employees. I mentioned already, I send a weekly news and notes newsletter. Previous position, in addition to the weekly newsletter, I would do a weekly robocall, so that we kind of communication twice a week. Smaller staff where I'm at now probably doesn't need that same thing because I'm talking to almost everybody every day. So again, thinking systems, bigger staff need to be more intentional about those pieces and aware of some of the differences there. But I work really hard to intentionally seek people out and ask them how they're doing, what's going on, and be a listener. And it's not, I think everybody who sits probably in this chair for an interview would say, I have an open door policy. But an open door policy probably only gets you feedback from about 20% of the people, right? It's about going out and seeking it and asking. And again, scale. Where I'm at now, compared to when I led a school previously with 800, very similar to the size with K-8, 800, I don't have to, I would have to do more surveys and do more of those pieces in the previous. Here, I go to every classroom almost every day and check in with teachers and have that intentionality and relationship and feel like I'm on top of it that way. So I think there's that piece. There's also a piece that needs to be defined in terms of there's a secondary principal and an elementary principal here, and how does the division there work, and I think that will take some work too to figure out exactly which things we're each is seeking feedback about. And I'll be real curious to learn about what that's looked like and sounded like in the past here. And so that's a big piece for me, is understanding. I'm well aware, having done my research before I even applied for the position, 'cause, I am happy where I'm at. I mean, I'll just say, I have a board that supports me, I have a great staff. This is an amazing opportunity, and it's really about the pull of the great opportunity and nothing about where I'm at right now, why I'm sitting here. But so I did my research and really considered it before I applied. And so I'm well aware of kind of where Woodbury Leadership Academy was 7, 8 years ago, and some of the challenges that the school community was facing. I'm well aware of sitting where you're sitting. It's a big decision, and it's hard. I've been a school board member, hired a superintendent before in my local district, and know, you know, it's probably the most important thing you do, because it impacts everybody else. I don't take myself too seriously, but this role impacts everybody in the organization, the kids, families, staff members, and so I get that. But I just think it's about being intentional and systemic, intentional about seeking feedback, asking the questions in a format that works in the context you're at. Where I'm at right now, that context, I can pretty much get that and have my pulse on where everybody's at. And I've built relationships and trust over 7 years where people know they can tell me, speak their truth. And that's something we've also worked really hard on. It's one of our norms in our STT meetings. Speak your truth, right? And, you know, we have a handful of norms that we hold each other accountable for, and that's one of them. And in order to have that, people need to know that, hey, they can disagree with me, I can disagree with them, and their feedback is still gonna be valued and considered, and we don't have to agree on everything. And so that takes time to build that trust, you know, in that way. So I would say that in terms of multiple stakeholders, and again, context is different. It looked very different for me at a school this size. I was, you know, doing our weekly bugle when I was at Barton to the entire community, which, you know, I had multiple people edit and, you know, really worked to be very intentional about, which is probably more needed at this scale in this community than the one I'm in right now. Looks a little different in that way. But whether it's that way or the robocalls, or it's having parent association meetings and getting, having the parent association lay out what they see as priorities for the school are, and including that in the work with our staff and school board. You know, those are all ways in which we've gone about it.
Board members, follow-ups?
You had said you're happy where you're at,
Mm-hmm.
and viewing this as a great opportunity. Can you just maybe talk a little bit more about that? Like, what is the big draw for you with WLA?
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So I talked to Bruce, I think, 3 days before the position closed. And we wanted to get more information about it, and he was great filling me in. And then I still was thinking, and I called and called Dr. Mortensen, who I don't know well, but we have been at the VOA conferences together and know each other a little bit. And she told me a whole bunch about the school. And I think things that were particularly appealing. The first thing that stood out for me was that you're adding high school 9, 10, 11, 12. If you weren't adding that, it probably wouldn't have been enough of a change where I would have applied. But I think one of the things that I really is unique, there's other people that have this, but that is unique compared to a lot of people in school administration, is I really have solid background at every level K-12 and really like all the levels. And my dream for our current place was that eventually we would be K-12, but where we've settled location-wise, and it's a long way off. I also, while I love my work, at the size we have been, I've had to be so in the weeds on everything, which in a way I like, because I like all the different parts of the job. That's my personality. I like transportation, I like special ed, I like, you know, the different pieces of finance. But, you know, I was trained, went through the process of getting a superintendent license, and being at a little level where there's more support support, having elementary principal and a secondary principal and a transportation manager, like that was a key right there. Half my time is transportation. You know, I'm thinking I might not have to be a bus driver on top of everything else. So I think there's some of that piece. When she talked about the diversity of the school, how it's, you know, basically a third white, a third Asian, a third black students, like that diversity, I really think is a neat diversity. The fact that I saw a match with RC, with us having implemented core knowledge language arts, that's another VOA school where I already know all these things, are all things that I think make it really appealing. But I'm somebody who, and this will be something that I will have to be very intentional about year 1 or 2 if I'm offered and we're able to get the position here. I'm somebody who draws energy from transformation, from seeing things change and grow and become, you know, so the move into the new building where I was at was huge, and having that experience, like, and seeing it start as one thing and become another. And so I really think adding the high school piece, and then I also, it's not my resume, but I was head basketball coach for girls and boys in 2 different districts, like the activities piece, being able to kind of be involved in that, which I think will be so critical to having a successful high school. There's just so many things that to attack and grow and yeah, and my noticings when I took a tour of the building today. I mean, we're after school, and I got all these kids in after-school activities that are all happy and smiling. The teachers that have been here since this morning are happy and smiling and positive energy. That added to the enthusiasm of the position, what I saw taking a tour today from the staff and students.
So let's get you back into the weeds a little bit.
Yep.
Tell us about your efforts to develop and maintain a healthy fund balance, right? What's worked and where have you been less than successful?
Well, that was the other thing I didn't tell you. We also started with basically no fund balance when I started too.
With what?
With basically no fund balance when I started too, where I was at. And right now it's about $500,000, which, you know, we've worked very closely with people and been very intentional about it. But I would say I kind of had a jump start in this because when I was the alternative ALC principal in 916, my first principal job for 7 years, I really had to manage the budget. I mean, there was a business manager, but it was all based on enrollment. It was every aspect of it. There was no other alternative high schools in the district. I was kind of like doing the same thing there in terms of managing our budget enrollment, and we grew it there as well. So I guess the first thing I'd say is that we've had a healthy fund balance. We've grown a healthy fund balance and pretty well maintained it where I'm at. Certainly seeing the $2+ million in the fund balance here is a benefit. But I do really fully understand. I think that's where we can look at the little handout I gave. I passed out there.
If you need to reference it.
I don't even need it.
Okay.
You don't really need to look at the front side in detail. I mean, the little side. All that is showing you is what I did is I went onto the MDE website and I tried to find 5 other schools that were comparable in terms of size at least. Charter schools that were K-8 that were similar, and was able to pull all that data off the website. And this is something that I've done with our, I've done it. I haven't really done it with our finance committee, but I think here this is something that we would do. But then when you flip it over to the other side, what that shows you is, based on what's on the front side, each of those schools, this is where we rank at Woodbury Leadership Academy compared to the other schools in the percentage of our revenue that we spend in each category. Okay? And what this is really helpful for is looking and saying, are we outliers anywhere? Right? And if we're outliers, then why? In order to get to the why, we would need to drill down to the expanded version. There's an expanded version of that has much more detail, like what's in each category and what's driving that. But you would maybe just look at that for the areas where we're outliers in trying to figure things out. And so that's a way, like the business managers we contract with, they don't do this. They don't do this stuff. That's where you need leadership at this level to understand, to really figure out how to utilize the resources the way that makes the most sense for the school and what the school's priorities are. And so that would be a tool I would try and use with the finance committee, and I just shared it with you to kind of demonstrate that I understand the stuff and implications and some ways of getting at some of these pieces, because I do think it's going to be a big piece for the future of the school. Every time you expand, if you just keep spending money the same way you haven't adjusted to the new reality. And it's going to be so important to be proactive, not only as we grow, but as education changes. And maybe I'll get to this in a later question because I know I'm in time, but I think particularly around attracting and retaining high-quality teachers.
Follow-ups? Well, all right then. Let's jump down to 4. Describe a time that a decision was made by the board that you did not agree with. How'd you handle it?
The honest answer to this question is going to be not very helpful. But honestly, that hasn't happened in the 7 years I've been there. Really, it just hasn't. We've always reached consensus on any decisions we've made, and I think if you were to, I don't know, if you were to call and talk to our board chair, who's been on the whole time I've been there, he would tell you the same thing, that really just really hasn't happened. We have a board that is pretty cohesive, that I feel very supported by, and that there's a level of trust there.
So how do you keep it from happening?
Well, you may not, just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it won't, right? I mean, it wouldn't happen here.
But what have you done to keep that record alive?
Well, I don't know that's necessarily intentional. I think that I bring a couple things, now that I think about this, as I'm processing. This is another thing about me that I try and call out so people learn it. Sometimes I process out loud. And I gotta call that out, or people sometimes think I made a decision on something when I'm just thinking about it. But as I'm thinking about this, one thing is we tend to have things as discussion items long before they're action items, or at least a month before they're action items, right? And so before I'm making recommendations, we've usually really talked it through, and I've gotten feedback and input from the board. And so a lot of times I'll bring something and say, okay, we're thinking about exploring this right now, and what input does the board have, and here's kind of what I'm thinking and process, and I try and incorporate that in before making recommendations, so we're not getting to that point. And so I think that makes a big difference. I think that's probably the biggest thing I would attribute it to, is really before we get to that point, and I can also be I'm solution oriented. I tend to, a lot of times people talk about compromise, and to me it's not about compromise most of the time, it's about finding solutions. And the difference to me is solutions are something that's realistic, doable, that solves the problem, that really all parties, it's mutually acceptable to all parties, right? And you try and find that instead of I give up this and you give up that. Trying to find and be creative and keep working till you find what the solutions are. I think that's key with working with behavior with students. You got to find solutions that are going to solve the problem, that are realistic, but it's got to work for the. It's what's hard about doing it as the administrator trying to solve the problem without the teacher in the room, because you don't know for sure what's mutually acceptable to the teacher all the time, right? It's why whenever possible, it's best to have all parties. But it's got to be mutually acceptable to the teacher and the student and solve the problem, because otherwise the student's probably not going to do it, or the teacher's not going to do it, right? And so it's about finding solutions. And so I think in doing that and not having that mindset, I think helps us get to that point.
Board members, follow-ups on that one?
Steal your follow-up question from the last time. If you were super passionate about something and you brought it to the board and the board just did not support moving forward with that, how would you handle that?
If super passionate is the key, that's what, as long as I don't think it's an ethical or legal or something that has such serious implications, I move on. Maybe bring it up again later. Maybe start to cycle back to it and see where we're at and if anything's changed. But if that's happening regularly, then we got concerns. Then it's hard for me to lead if the things I'm passionate about are regularly, and then we start thinking, right, is this the right long-term thing, right? I mean, my hope is if I'm offered and accept this position, that I'm at the point in my career, this will likely be my last position before retirement. It's my hope, right? So I hope we wouldn't get there. That's the mindset I have around it anyways. And but if that's happening over and over again, then you get to a place where it's hard to leave. Sometimes if there's something that I'm passionate about, and then it's board's not on board, and we got teachers and parents and community members on the board, you have a role for a reason, and there's no point in you coming to meetings and put all the time and effort in if you don't have some ability to have influence. And so as the role I have, would need to respect that as well. And so, yeah, I guess that would be the answer, but it would depend, but generally I think you move on and respect the role of the board members as a team.
Thank you.
Other follow-ups? We're on the way. Let's jump to number 5. What have you done to develop a healthy culture and create a visible presence?
I had a hard time putting words to this in the last, with the teachers and parents, with all the questions. I'm not sure why, because we have an extremely healthy culture, and I'm extremely visible. I think I've had a hard time identifying what I did to get us there, and to call it out. And again, I hate to keep saying the same thing for different questions, but context matters in all of this too, right? And I'm able to just each day make an effort to get around the building and be everywhere and connect with everybody and have relationships and ask questions but it's really about, well, one of the letters you have there, which you wouldn't have had to check, but the first letter from a teacher was one that is a teacher Megan, who was with us. She moved to Ohio when her husband got transferred. But when I asked her to write that letter I think on Sunday or Monday, she turned it around the next day, which is very nice. But in there, she talked about her experience, maybe somewhere in the middle, maybe third paragraph, maybe second paragraph. She talked about when she had her maternity leave, and it was the first one we had with this particular school, and it was a rough time for her for right away. She had some challenges, but she talked about how she felt listened to, heard, that I cared about her as a person, and worked through and came up with the best solutions for students and family. I think just having enough of those individual interactions where you build trust and people know that you care about them and that you don't just view them as an employee, but as a person who, that's the biggest thing I really think is it's really about each individual interaction building upon each other. And yeah, sometimes as a boss, I have to make decisions people don't agree with. And sometimes you might even have to make a decision that the staff member's not working out. And I'll make those difficult decisions, but when you have built enough trust that people know you're making them for the right reasons and it's about what's best for the kids and even the other employees. Usually when you get to the place where you're making that decision, the employee is causing stress for other employees too. Right? And so building that trust and that fairness, and I'm confident, and you guys can really do this if you want. I'm confident if you were to call Twin Lakes STEM Academy tomorrow, say, can I talk to whichever teachers on prep? That whoever you got would say they feel supported, trusted, you know, working with me. And you know, I'm proud of that. And that's one of the reasons I hesitated before applying, because, you know, it takes a while to build that and get to that point. So again, I don't know how specific that is. And that's, okay, my personality, part of the long-windedness, needing to be concise, part of the processing out loud. I mean, I have an ADHD personality, and I don't say that just jokingly. I mean, I legitimately do. I take medicine for it, right? Which is a strength in these positions because it helps me be visible. It helps me balance all the different things. If I'm in one place too long, it drains energy, doesn't add it to me. And I just have to be aware that, hey, these are the things that come with it that I have to be intentional about, and I try and be intentional about them. And I think that makes me, it's much more of a strength in this role than it is a weakness, but very often for everybody, strengths and weaknesses are grounded in the same thing. And I tell people that all the time, and so, yeah.
Cool. Follow-ups?
Yeah, so you've used the word relationships a few times during this interview. How, so thinking back to your past and the relationships that you've cultivated, how has that affected and has played a role in your journey so far?
Well, I think the successes I've had, that's what I would attribute it to more than anything. Certainly there's a lot of different, you know, pieces to being a successful leader, and certainly I've made mistakes and learned from them and tried to grow from them. But when you have relationships, and it doesn't mean that everybody's friends with me or everybody thinks, you know, that we're like, I'm great or, you know, whatever. There's, you know, different relationships with different people, but they are built on trust and that we're all going the same direction and we all here for the same reasons. At the same time, I'm also very intentional about having some professional boundaries as well. For example, I love that our staff goes out to happy hour or has events, you know, holiday parties and things like that. I don't think it's the appropriate place for me, right? I think that they should be able to let down with the boss around and, you know, not that there can't ever be any socializing. For example, whenever a staff member has a baby, I try and go visit them at their home and meet the baby and do things like that. But so it's not complete separation, but really trying to be intentional about where those boundaries are. And so we can have close relationships built on trust, but there also has to be some professional boundaries. And that becomes especially important when you do have to make difficult decisions. And so it's really finding that balance that I tried to do and be aware of. Did I answer your question? I don't.
Yeah.
You know, I want to underline something Ryan said, because you talked about relationships and the fact that we're all human and make mistakes. Can you tell me about a time you inadvertently damaged a professional relationship and what'd you do to repair it?
I don't know if I damaged a professional relationship, really, but I'll tell you about the first thing that came to mind because it happened yesterday. Yesterday and the day before. That came to mind. And that is, there was, we had an issue in our sixth grade class, which our sixth grade class has been great, hasn't had many issues this year, but there was actually a fist fight. It was pretty ugly. And I was dealing with one of the students involved. And probably didn't get the whole story ahead of time enough, wasn't deliberate enough, and reacted a little quickly in the situation and probably was a little more harsh than I should have been. Didn't have any wrongdoing or anything. I mean, you know, it just wasn't the way I would normally handle a situation. And I think the teacher involved didn't think I handled it particularly well. Actually, I didn't necessarily know that at that time. But after I reflected on that situation that night, so 2 nights ago, when we have a like a 2-3 minute morning meeting. Whole staff comes to the library for 3 minutes in the morning. If anybody's out, we kind of talk about how we're covering and just get everybody on the same page, go, right? It's not anything big. But at the morning meeting, I just called out, I said, hey, you know, one of the things I believe is that our most successful teachers, almost universally in my experience, are most reflective. Usually they are identifying when things they could have done better before I do, and are very reflective about it. And that's something I really try to encourage of all of you, and I need to model that for you. And I just wanted to tell you all that, you know, we had a situation with a 6th grade student yesterday. After reflecting on it, I think I handled it very poorly. I would handle it very differently, and I'm gonna try and rectify that. But I just want you to know that, and in part, just for those of you that don't even know what I'm talking about, just so you see me modeling, you know, what I'm hoping we do. And, you know, I think sometimes when teachers are struggling, if they're trying to cover it up and not identify the issues, I'm much more concerned than if I see them working to get better and seeking feedback and being open to coaching. And so I'm trying to model that for you. So that wasn't necessarily a professional relationship. So let me see if I can come up with that. I feel like
It hit the target, yep.
Did I? Okay.
Very much.
Well done.
Okay.
Let's jump to 6. What have you seen, and you kind of touched on this a little bit in terms of some of your answers, but what have you done to organize your efforts so that other employees and community members are involved in collaboration?
Yeah, I mean, the two biggest things I think have already touched on. So maybe I'll be more concise on this one, just reiterate what I've already said, and say, really, starting the parent foundation organization, getting the input from them. We got the input from them in depth before we worked on the 7th and 8th grade expansion, for example, before we adopted the whole new science focus that we kind of implemented. So that's the parent side of it. On the staff side, really what we do in SDT every Friday is just so collaborative, and the fact that staff-led are kind of the big things. I have to go back really probably a couple jobs to get to where I've worked with like community organizations and businesses and so on and so forth. You know, working with the City of Brooklyn Park when I was in the Osseo schools. We did a lot of work with them on working with the business community and having business leaders come in and work with our students, and was kind of a big piece we did there. But it's a little different context where I'm at right now, and that would be something that would be a little different in this role than my current one.
Follow-ups? All right. What have you done to maintain communication with board members between meetings?
Good question. So I want to talk about this from a couple different angles. One, what I had modeled for me when I was a school board member in a district with, 11,000 students and bigger, and what the superintendents, both the superintendents, because we actually hired a new superintendent when I was there, so my year and a half on the board, I was appointed to replace somebody when I was a year and a half. I got to see two different superintendents model, but they would do weekly newsletters once a week with updates to the board. And I think in this context, in a little organization, that's what I would expect to do here, is a weekly kind of board update in some way, shape, or form. In addition to, if there's anything that comes up that's kind of a big deal the board member should know, then that would be a separate communication. Likely through email, I would assume, what's been modeled in those ways. I think it's important that if we're sharing something with somebody as a board member, it should be shared with all the board members, right? So there's not little cliques and things going on. Gets a little tricky with having teachers on the board when you're talking to teachers in the day and things are coming up, like, am I talking to you as a teacher, or am I talking to you as a board member right now? So that can get a little, and I try and also call out, hey, I'm talking to you with your board, I need you to put your board member hat on right now. Or I'm not talking to you as a board member, I'm talking to you as, fourth grade teacher and what we need to think about right now. I try and call that out when I can to kind of set that context. But, so I think that would be a piece. With the board I have right now, and it's been an as-needed basis, depending on what's going on, right? So sometimes they might be hearing from me every week, and, other times I might only hear from me once between board meetings, depending on the context of where we're at. I think at this size, probably needs to be more systemic and be a weekly communication, kind of keep everybody in the loop. But I would also defer to what the board wants, right? I would also seek feedback, to actually, when I started where I'm at now, thinking back now, I was doing weekly communication, the feedback is too much, we don't need all this, right, from. So I think there's a little bit of that, the dialogue that happens as we create norms, and I don't know what your current reality is.
So did you take that and decrease your communication?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So right now, if a board member is contacted by a parent, we generally refer them to the director.
Mm-hmm.
Would would continue that? Would that be the best course of action if a parent had an issue or something? We just refer that teacher or that parent to the director to handle it?
Yes, unless they've already been working with me and they're not happy, then I think they have a right to, express their displeasure with me to board members. You supervise me as a whole. But then I think it's also really important to remind the parents that as a whole, we supervise the board. I don't, as an individual, I can't, and I will share your concerns if you think that's warranted, or it can be part of my evaluation, or you may come to me, get more information. But those are norms that I think are gonna be really important that, if I were offered the job and if things work out, probably there needs to be a good work session to establish what has been me knowing that's really important, me knowing what the current reality is. And my assumption across the board was, unless there are things that have to change because of changing realities with the school growing, and things changing, as much as possible, school's functioning well right now as I understand it. And I also think, based on what I think there's some trauma probably from before Kathy came that people are scared to go back to, I would guess. And so people want to see stability and, so whatever, even though I talk about transformation being what energizes me, that doesn't have to happen right away. Right to start with, it's about establishing confidence that we're going to maintain the things that are in place and that are working, and me understanding those things. And unless there's something I'm really uncomfortable with, or there's other factors that are pushing that they need to change right away, I would hope that the first year we would operate in a very similar way to the way it has operated. And over time, as I understand the context here and the board better, and you get to know me better, we may change some of those things to fit the changing reality. But I'm not going to be coming in and trying to do anything dramatically different unless we need to be proactive on something. It would be my thinking.
Let's jump to the last one. What would be your professional and personal goals for the first 12 months starting on 7/1?
I kind of just said it, right? I mean, that everybody, the people, anxiety about the transition comes down, that there's stability, that we continue to make sure that, I always say the difference between a manager and a leader is, the manager can keep the trains running in time, that whole thing, and leaders are leading change. But first, we got to establish that the trains are running on time, right? We've got to build that and build trust that we're going to continue to, have the things that are good in place. Maybe try and find one or two things that are easy, quick wins to build some confidence. I don't know what those are yet until you examine the situation, but if there's one or two things that are if people have wished would be different, that we could somehow positively address in that first year, great. But if we can't, we can take the time to get there too. So I know it's not very specific, but I think that, looking at long range, we've got to first build the stability, the confidence, the trust, and keep things moving. And I think the less change that happens in that first year or two, probably the better. On the other hand, you add 9th grade, you add 10th grade, there's changing dynamics with teacher shortage, there's all kinds of things that you also have to be prepared for, that, if you're not being forward-looking to what is changing around you, keeping everything exactly the same could be problematic too, so you gotta be careful on that end too.
Board, follow up to that?
So I'm kind of curious with adding high school, and I don't know, I feel like for high school, like there's a lot of importance to add more activities, sports, got that beautiful gym. Do you have any experience with adding that? I mean, not just like an activity to a school where it's like you might have a club, but like maybe it's a basketball team that's competing with other charter schools or,
Yeah.
that type
Well,
of thing.
in terms of specifically basketball, I mean,
Not
in
just
addition,
I mean,
no,
any
but
sport.
I'm saying, in addition to being the head coach, I also did all the youth things with my daughter's teams and the summer programs. And I coached other sports too. My wife's an art person, she's an elementary art teacher, so the art piece of it. But it's one of the big questions I have I asked Bruce when I'm still considering applying, what is their thinking around activities? Because my perception is that for the high school to be, in a lot of cases, what I've seen is when the kids get to, sometimes even middle school, but for sure high school, they leave the charter schools to go to the high schools where they have more activities opportunities. And having a strong activities program is, especially if it's gonna be not heavily PSEO focused on the high school, having the strong activities program is what's gonna keep the kids here and happy here. And it can also fill a void, because they're in communities like Woodbury, where it's so big and so much growing. I mean, you look at, you'll have 60, 70 kids trying out for your youth basketball teams in the winter, and by the time you get to be a senior in high school, there's usually 3 or 4 seniors on the roster, because it's just where you can actually have an opportunity for kids to participate at a varsity level in that way. But it's also gonna be really important to identify what our students are interested in. Like, if we have an activities director, I did see online the presentation about adding high school, like the first little vision or whatever that was presented at board meeting, and talked about having an activities director. Like, one of the big things I would hope from the activities director is they're gonna identify and have a focus on, hey, we're shooting to have, I don't know that 100% is realistic, because there are some kids that are gonna choose to work and do other things besides school activities. But one of the things is, how are we gonna get a higher percentage as possible of students involved in extracurricular activities? They keep kids from being other places, doing other things that maybe would be less desirable, and keep them engaged and excited about school. And I just think it's a real key, and there might be some kids like, hey, they can't participate at high school because they would get cut from the teams or programs that would have a place here, and it can fill that void. So, I don't know about, running youth camps in my roles, things I've done, but I certainly see it as a high priority. And really the key, as much of a key as anything in terms of having a strong, viable high school program that has students that are excited about school. And I don't mean just sports, it could be robotics, it could be, whatever it is the kids are interested in, that will do is what we want to offer.
Are we close to closure, board? Jonas, thank you. Thanks for coming, thanks for the file. We're on the way.
All right. That was
Great job.
Fabulous.
Gordon, you've
What's
got
that?
about a 10-minute break. I'll walk you out.
Perfect.
Give you next step.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in.
What Lisa did is facilitated, as I did, asking the questions, and then she had a discussion with the participants, without the interviewees in the room, and asked them, so on candidate 1, what did you like? You know, what concerns might you have? For candidate 2, the same thing. So she can give you some results, you can have some Q&A here, I'll see you back in a couple of moments.
Thank you. Hi, welcome.
Hi, it's nice to be here. Thanks for
No, thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for
having
coming
me.
to work for us.
Yeah, and the setup was really nice, that the space worked well, so thank you for that. And we had all the supplies and materials we needed, and the sound system was a good option, so thank you. All right, so like Bruce said at the conclusion of the interview that I had, I gave those in attendance about 2 minutes just to kind of think and reflect on what they had heard. And I did let people know that no matter if they knew either or both of the candidates personally or professionally, that they should focus their comments on what they heard at the interview today. And so we started out with strengths, and then they shared some comments. I'll share those with you. I've grouped some of them, but some might be random just because I just took down notes of how they came. So the first.
Before you get started, I'm
Yeah.
trying to raise a couple dozen people there.
Oh, thank you for asking that. There were like 15 to 16 in attendance at both. And I think that there was one individual who came partway through the first session and was not able to stay for all of the second session, but was there for part of that. So, yeah. And we had people raise hands if they were family, if they were parents or community members, and then if they were staff, just so the candidate would have a sense of who was in the room. So, all right. So I'll begin with Nick Rice, since his interview was first. Strengths that were mentioned was certainly that he had charter school experience, and that was important. His experience and knowledge of restorative practices was mentioned. He gave some examples during the interview of when he sought out opportunities for both students and staff, and he, for some of those opportunities, worked directly with the Minnesota Department of Education, and so he led efforts to seek out additional training for staff and students He also talked about his interaction with the community, particularly with the Indigenous community, in order to provide opportunities for students. Other strengths that were mentioned was his focus on social emotional learning. Several of his answers attended to the concept of school culture. He stated that kids need to feel safe first before learning can occur. And another strength was that he has familiarity with the school, and that may allow for a smoother transition. So those were the strengths that were mentioned by the group. In terms of concerns that individuals had, one was that he did not have licensure, principal licensure, and that he did not have charter school leadership experience that was comparable to that of an executive director. There were concerns expressed regarding visibility in the school and relationships. In terms of visibility, he mentioned being in and out of the classroom. Someone in attendance said, no, he's really not in classrooms and has been in their classroom 1 or 2 times this year. Another individual stated that he is not often seen by middle school students or teachers, and students sometimes ask, who is he? There was, in terms of relationships with students, that also dovetails into the question about reducing and eliminating bullying. It was shared that some days in the middle school setting that there might be 10 to 12 issues of bullying on a daily basis, and that those issues are often dealt with or need to be dealt with by the teachers themselves. If such instances involve a student who has a case manager, that often it's the case manager who needs to solve the bullying issue, and they need to do so, they aren't given guidance on how to approach particular situations.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you during your
Yeah.
presentation. Is that number high? 10 to 12 a day, just my gut check on it says that's a lot.
That's not really for me to
Okay,
determine.
you don't have comparables from other schools or anything. It's okay, I get it, it's not a question.
Yeah, I mean, you're a large school, that's all I know you're the size of your population, but
Maybe not that high, but close.
Okay.
I have a question. Were these comments made like with Mr. Rice present, or like were like
No.
questions were asked like, how did you handle XYZ situation? How often are you in classrooms? And then that was like a thing, or these are just teachers saying after he has left the room, this is people saying, here's what we're seeing.
correct. So, well, but also in response to, there is a question about, number 5, talks about developing a healthy school culture and relating a visible presence. So then someone commented that he was in their classroom 1 or 2 times, or that in middle school, kids don't know who he is. So it
It's
was.
still not clear whether he was still in the room.
Oh, no,
or he
no,
was gone.
no, I'm sorry, I didn't address that part. After the interview had concluded and the candidates had left the space, then I gave about 2 minutes of think time to people, and that also helped the candidates get farther away. Yeah, and then just asked for strengths and concerns. So, regarding restorative practices, the circle process was talked about and its use was talked about for both teachers and kids. A staff participant said that staff conflict when staff conflict occurs in the building, that Mr. Rice does not initiate meetings with them to help resolve the conflict, and that teachers have the responsibility of sorting it out themselves. So an additional teacher reported that they said that they needed support for a colleague following a student's IEP more closely, and that was not being addressed.
So the hard part, I think, and I'll just hold you for 1 second, is that the second candidate doesn't have that level of day in and day out experience here. So, you know, obviously some people have come to that meeting with an axe to grind, and I appreciate you reporting. I mean, I think you're doing what you're supposed to do. But board, that's a little, that puts you in a tough situation, because we didn't have the same level of day-to-day interaction people from Jonas's building here. Thanks for that brief interview. I'm just stating what you all know, but thanks.
Other things that were mentioned, one person was surprised that he didn't talk much about his experience at WLA so far. Much of the anecdotal information was about, came from examples of other schools where he was at. And let's see, finally, making sure I hit all of the comments. One person had a concern that he took credit for something in this building that a particular grade level team was largely responsible for. Oh, I have one more thing. In regard to the question on diversity, equity, and inclusion, one person wanted to hear about more aspects of inclusion, particularly around sexual identity and gender. And that concludes the comments.
Any questions on that?
All right. For Jonas Bugan, a strength that was mentioned of this candidate had to do with his credentials. People mentioned that he does possess a principal and superintendent license and has served as an executive director of a charter school. Another cited 18 years of school leadership experience. I didn't add up the years myself. I don't know if it's 18 or something else. They also said that he has experience K through 12, grades K through 12. His examples, he also talked about his familiarity and experience with the science of reading, with letters training. He talked about responsive classroom. Someone liked the fact that he currently serves in a school with the same authorizer, VOA, and that has been involved in leading school expansion efforts, including acquiring property. Additionally, with the experience that one of the districts where he served had a heavy focus on special education, and they felt that that would be beneficial to the leadership role. And they were referring to Northeast Metro 916. Some other things where there was commonality across comments, there were two people that commented on the fact that he has interest in pursuing the Core Knowledge School of Distinction credential or that process. And now I'll share a bunch of random strengths. He emphasized communicating with staff, particularly with teachers, and with different groups of teachers, like individuals on the behavior team or intervention teams, as well as special education teachers. One said that they felt he was knowledgeable about best practices and named specific books and people that he has learned from. He asks questions, admits when he is wrong, and assumes positive intentions. He stated that kids want to do well, and that actually all people want to do well, and that he did expect the best from everyone. He has experience with the financial aspects that go along with school expansion. Another commented that smooth transition was one of his top 3 priorities, and that put the person who made the comment at ease. One shared he seemed authentic and his answers were not scripted. They appreciated that he gave examples saying, today this happened, or yesterday, or last week. He takes time to research, or he took time to research what WLA is all about before applying for the position. One of the examples that he talked about had to do with a particular school schedule where there was 4.5 days of school and school was longer, and that left Friday afternoons for staff meetings and professional development. They liked the philosophy behind the Friday afternoon and how it might provide some time for people that wasn't on their prep time to do the kind of meeting and learning that is expected of teachers. One said they thought he came across as humble, sincere, and thoughtful. In terms of expansion, that his values aligned, they felt, with the goals of WLA in terms of expansion, and that he understood that there's the potential for expansion to pull focus from elementary or middle school programming, and he acknowledged that that can sometimes happen in the expansion process or any large change endeavor, but that one thing that was important was that those challenges regarding pulling of focus were anticipated and identified, and then also that there were plans made around that. He felt growth was a good thing. He mentioned asking questions if he wasn't sure about something. And he also spoke of researching things to learn more and to think about things in new ways. And sometimes said that he would throw out ideas that were not aligned with what he believes, just to get people talking. In terms of concerns, because he is not an internal candidate, people don't have prior knowledge of him aside from what's on paper and what they heard, and so they'll have to take him at his word. One person said they appreciated the experience that he brings, but the experience is at smaller schools that likely have a much smaller budget than that of WLA. One person was wondering why he might be looking to leave his current position. Another person wanted to hear more about how he was involved with the community. In terms of the diversity, equity, and inclusion question, an individual wished that they heard a little bit more than about special education. And then also he referenced a situation where the school where he was serving had a large Somali population, and that one of the ways that diversity of student population was addressed was that they purposely sought out a site in a different geographic location where the neighborhood was more diverse. And the individual said there are more types of diversity than race. So that concludes the comments that were shared.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Board members, questions about the process or the results she just delivered?
Yes, so you just gave us a lot of feedback and comments.
Yes.
What percentage do you think were from staff and what were from community or parents?
There were about 15 to 16 people in each session, and at the beginning, when I had people show their hands, there were no more than 4 family or community members. The rest were staff.
And that's true for both sessions.
Yes,
Was it mostly the same people in both sessions?
yes.
Other questions?
And these comments contain both staff and family or community comments. And just by virtue of numbers of who was there, it's more heavily staff. I didn't tally
Yeah, yeah.
which came from which.
That's a lot of help.
Yeah.
It's more than good enough.
Yeah.
Anything else? Board? Okay, we're good. Thank you very much for
Okay.
the help
Thank you.
tonight.
Time.
Yeah, that was outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Very
thank you
helpful.
for having me.
And when does the next production come off?
Second weekend is this week. I run a youth theater company in Wayzata called Blue Water Theater Company, and we're starting up week 2 of All Shook Up tomorrow.
Oh, good luck.
Good luck.
Thanks so much.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
let's
you.
take it around. Yeah, take off a lot of those. Thanks.
Thanks for helping us out, we
You're
appreciate it.
welcome.
Yep.
We did clarify with Jim that it did have to remain open, because that was a question that I had.
Do I leave the camera on?
Board, the typical way to go through this is to let each board member speak about what they perceive as positives for a candidate, as well as the concerns. At one point, I'll be asking you to make a decision about what you want to do. Remember that you can see both people again. You can see one person again. You can decide to see no one again and offer the contract. You could decide to see no one again and go deeper into the pool for the search. Could we start with board members' thoughts, pluses and minuses for our first candidate that we saw, which was Nick? In no particular order. Board members, your thoughts about positives?
A passionate guy, he's a well-spoken candidate. I like the enthusiasm that he brought.
I agree, I could hear him well, I knew what he was saying all the time. He was very passionate about certain things that he is bringing to the table. He seems very knowledgeable about charter schools and certain practices that work best at charter schools.
The fact that he's already here, I see as a plus. Charter school experience, the restorative justice programs that he's familiar with.
I think that his passion for the high school program really comes across when he was speaking. It was very clear that he knew exactly what direction that he wanted to go with it, what opportunities he wanted to take with athletics. Having the peer observations was something that he mentioned as well, which I think is nice to have, like a teacher mentor program within WLA. I think that would be a strength and would build community within the school as well. So I thought that was a nice idea, and I think that his answer to number 8 was nice, how he had a lot of opportunities that he saw for the future.
Yeah.
Board members, other thoughts from the people we haven't heard from regarding positives on the first candidate?
I mean, I think I echo what everybody has said, and I haven't in my own mind individually made a decision yet on anything, but I think he has a lot of potential. I just think it's just early on in his journey. I think he's really passionate about this position. I think, again, he has great potential, but it's really early on in his growth in this. And I think it would take maybe a bit more to get him up to speed and onboarding and, get to the level where I would like to see our candidate just be able to slide in and do their duties. So, but you can feel the passion and you can see it, but that's just kind of learning.
Other thoughts about the positives for our first candidate?
Yeah, I mean, just like kind of what everyone is saying, I appreciate Nick's.
By the way, I was watching you take notes. You hammered it. Man, you were working.
Yeah, I take great notes. He's passionate about building our high school, and that's where we're going. That's our vision, and I think that's why we brought him on board in the role that he is in. And so, like, knowing that passion is going to be there is his biggest, not his biggest, but a big positive in his favor.
Yeah, I would echo with everybody else, his passion, his enthusiasm, he seems pretty well prepared, in terms of some of his answers, but, I don't know, I kind of a little bit concerned about maybe where he's at. I know we're not quite on the negative part, but, it does seem a little maybe early in his career. I'm a little worried, and I don't know, like, with the timing, like the whole slide into place thing, because he doesn't have the licensure yet, so, because isn't Dr. Kathy gonna retire by the end of the school year, and he was saying it's gonna take him 12 months, so then how does that even work to start in the fall?
He can get a variance.
Okay.
Oh,
I don't think you can get a variance
No?
for principal's license. So, like with our authorizer, my understanding anyway of how things work is like there has to be a licensed individual as your signer. And so,
I saw a document saying he was
So
getting a
if you can't
variance.
get a variance, how does that even, like,
How is it legal?
yeah, what do we do in the fall then, if we were to say, okay, Nick, we're gonna offer you that position, and,
You would enter into agreement with somebody that had the licensure.
okay,
It could be Kathy, it could be the other company, but as a person that is essentially the signatory that has a licensure.
okay.
It's not ideal, but it's not, but it gets done.
Have you seen that happen often at other charter schools with?
I wouldn't use the phrase often, and I think what's important to remember is that, based on what Nick said tonight, is that he would probably be certified within a year, and so you would really only be looking for somebody to be that signatory for a very short period of time. Got one more board member to hear from regarding positives?
Well, I certainly like his enthusiasm and his, and he is familiar with what's going on here. With Jonas, he's kind of coming in blind. Nick has an advantage over him, but as far as the licensure, that aspect of it, if he signs on with Kathy and somewhere down the line he doesn't complete it, what do we do then? Here we are, we're starting over again in a year from now, going through all this. So I guess would probably be one of my biggest concerns. You know, he's new to the school, so I'm not going to take a lot of the negative things that were said. I'm not gonna put a lot of weight on him, he's not visible. Well, he's busy, in his role that he has. And, if he's a director, well, then maybe he can, that'll change, so, maybe, his workload is different. Probably not any lighter, but it may be different to where he can, meet with the teachers, have a better communication with the teachers and the staff and things like that, so. Yeah, I liked his enthusiasm, but, there's, he's not perfect, but he's new, but then that's okay too, because we were all new at one time in our jobs.
It's the only thing we all have in common.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, there might be another couple of things.
Yeah.
The only thing I can guarantee.
So board members, could we each take a moment then and identify concerns you would have about a candidate one? And then again, we'll do the same process, doing a positive and negative for Jonas. So board members, any concerns about our first candidate?
I think we're all just concerned about the experience level and can he complete the role on his own without too much assistance from Dr. Mortensen, sort of consultant position and so forth.
I have two concerns, and one of them actually is one that I mentioned as a strength, but I worry that his passion could be his undoing, right? When we were talking about priorities, he was boiling the ocean to a certain extent. Nicole, you reined him in and said, okay, I need you to boil this down to 3, but, if everything's a priority, nothing is. And Patrick, I hear you and I respect your position. I do give a little bit more weight to the staff comments because anytime somebody's willing to say something in public that could put them at risk, they certainly feel strongly about it. And to dovetail off of that, he talked a lot about being visible. So you're right, he's probably busy, but it was a point of pride to him to be visible. So there's some perception stuff there possibly.
To kind of add on to that, one of my biggest concerns in my notes that I wrote down is he's been here for 4 months and he didn't talk about anything at WLA that he's doing. So if I'm trying to sell you on I'm great for WLA, what are you doing here that is showing us that you're the right fit for us? So that was my biggest concern in almost all of my videos was, where's the WLA data? Where's the WLA evidence? This is where you're at now. It's been 4 months. What are you doing here? And so that was my biggest concern.
I think that's good feedback.
I'm right with it. I was gonna say that too. I put WLA with a question mark by most of my questions. I didn't dive into it at the time for the sake of time. But I mean, you have a unique position here. It just may be an interview skill set or that he just didn't think because of nerves. But I mean, he has a unique position here where he comes in with a lot of insight into how this culture is and the pros and the cons. You think that you would try to leverage that a little bit more. So
Yeah.
I'm a bit let down in that category. So.
I would also say that we've spoken to experience, but just with the previous schools also being very small, we heard about roughly 60, and then about 200 to 250, where we are a lot bigger than that. So I think that there's, if we were a smaller school and we had less experience, and he had less experience, and I think, hey, maybe that's okay because it's an opportunity to grow with your school population size. But I think since our population is nearly 3 or 4 times that size, we're also expanding, and then you'd be new to the role, which I think that he could be. I mean, it could be wonderful, but without the licensure and opportunities to still grow under a mentor, and then years from now he could be exceptional on his own.
Got 3 other board members to hear from on the potential downside or concerns?
Still thinking.
I can jump in, I guess, or go ahead.
Well, some of the strengths and weaknesses, the balance of those on the two candidates kind of makes me concerned, but it's hard to know who they're coming from and why they're coming from. The licensure, less experience. I mean, I don't really have anything new to add, other than the balance of the other room comments.
Until we go around the table once.
Not when you have the
I would echo what everybody else.
handcuffs.
The WLA thing, I was really kind of thrown by that. I would have thought there would have been a lot more examples or dovetails to that. And I think I kind of agree with Mike too, that it was a little concerning to me to hear about a lot of the teacher staff making some of those comments that, well, he's not really visible. Kids saying, who is that guy? Like, I don't know, they kind of threw that answer maybe a little bit under the bus, so. And the license, I guess, is a concern too. 'Cause with the size of our school and wanting to grow to a high school, do we have time to learn on the job as much as have somebody slide in with some more experience with the financials, with expanding, all those other things, so.
And finally,
Well, I guess there's gonna be one way we're gonna find out that he wasn't the man for the job if he quits after this, if he doesn't get the director job. You know what I'm saying, you know?
Not really.
Well, yeah, well, you know, if we don't hire him, is he gonna quit? And that's, in that itself is proof that he wasn't the right guy for the job, director job.
I think that's a pretty unlikely happenstance, but I understand what you're saying.
I don't think we
I
can
think
make
he
a
has a
decision
strong-
on whether he leaves
Right.
the
Yeah.
school totally and we have a hole because we don't hire him.
I think
That's
it's-
not this decision.
Passion for WLA though, like I don't think his character, based off everything every time I've interacted with him in my experiences, that's not the kind of character I would assume he'd have.
And he does have longevity in the other positions too, so I don't think he's a job hopper. Let's go to Jonas. Can we hear from each board member your thoughts about strengths?
Did Ryan
Oh, I'm
have
sorry.
something
Ryan,
else to
you
say?
wanna jump in? Yeah. I may have realized. Let's go to Jonas. Tell us where you think his strengths are, what you're pleased with.
Very knowledgeable. He has gone through everything you want to go through, and so he has a very high level of experience. He seemed very comfortable talking to us. He seemed very relaxed. Had a very personable conversation with us. I enjoy that. You know, meeting new people is hard and making those connections is hard, but I can tell right away that he's an easy guy to get to know and gets to know his staff well.
I was impressed that he included some performance reviews. You know, letter of references are great too, but, you know, people can find somebody that's gonna say something nice about them, where a performance review is a little bit more of an unvarnished thing. Now, obviously, they're gonna be favorable, you know, but he's still willing to show them. I thought the financial analysis showed kind of some cleverness and a creativity that impressed me around, okay, where are we spending in each category compared to certain benchmarks. I thought that was good. And, I may be showing some bias here because I asked him the question, but I thought he showed a lot of self-awareness when he told me about, you know, I didn't handle the fight well, I did a relationship. I mean, that's life. Every time we interact with people, you know, sometimes we don't give us at our best, and we do damage relationships with people that we work with. And, you know, it's what you do after that matters. You know, and so I was impressed with that.
Don't tell off that. I thought it was commendable too, to do it in front of the whole staff, to kind of share that experience and handle it well, to share, not just with that individual teacher, but the entire staff. And yeah, experience, he seems to have the financial piece, he's had experience with expansion. And just some of his answers too, like, well, pulling back to, well, just yesterday, or, you know, not just going way back 10 years ago. I don't know, it just more personal.
I like the, well, when he answered, I can't remember which question it was, but, you know, he said, It was with question number 4, I do believe, and his answers was solutions, not so much compromising. So he showed that he, you know, he values other people's opinions, and you know, and then so if it, you know, if they can't agree on a question now or a subject now, maybe later on after you people have, you know, thought about it, you know, slept on it, so to speak, you know. So I liked that. I liked his answer there. You know, he puts seemed to put a high value or priority on communicating with staff. You know, had good teacher engagement. You know, sounded like he was a real good team player. So, you know, not an overlord, but you know.
I was impressed with him saying, call my school tomorrow, ask for whatever teacher is on prep, and because, I mean, it's a wild card, right? You really don't know who you're gonna get, but I think that his confidence in that answer is very telling of a person. Like, maybe not everyone has the best relationship with him, but they respect him, which is what you want in an executive director role. I don't need a friend, I need someone that I can go to for mentorship, leadership, and to lead the school to success. I kind of was thinking before the meeting kind of what we wanted, and I was thinking responsibility, obligation, and accountability. You know, that's kind of what I'm looking for here to lead our school into this next stage, especially with a high school. And I think that his experience with K-12, 18 years I think was mentioned, and having that superintendent principal licensure just would set us off very well into this next stage of the WLA life. I don't know. So
I guess I would echo, you know, if things have been said, but his overarching experience, having the licensure, K-12, seems very genuine.
I will throw out a few things. A weekly newsletter. I think our parents and stakeholders say all the time that they want more communication, and so like knowing that that's a priority to him to communicate weekly aligns with what we want. It would be an area of improvement for us. When he said, I got my superintendent's license for a reason, like I didn't, right? I got my principal's license and chose not to take the superintendent route because I know my strengths. So if he's saying like, I chose that one and I'm not getting to do those things necessarily as much as I would like where I am because I also wear 7,000 other hats, which we all know charter world. But he's saying like, I'm ready to get back into those higher level roles. And that's something that we need to find. And then additionally, just his focus on instruction. I mean, he talked about test scores. He talked about, you know, the work that's being done in PLCs, the fact that they're digging into data, the fact that they're spending their, 30 minutes on business, 90 minutes on what can we do for student learning. And so those are my 3 big pluses for him.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's a seasoned pro. I mean, he just is. I'm a big picture guy. I'm not a Shelby note taker guy. So I just have like 2 buckets, which are yes and no. And you just either pour, into one or the other as it fills up. But leadership for me is, and I brought up the relationship thing. It's like, to me, that is one of the most important traits of a good leader is just having relationships with people. And he admittedly said it, like good or bad, basically, And so I like that. He's a team player. He's transparent. He, has good accountability for himself and others. I mean, just some really good characteristics and qualities of a good leader that I think everybody would like to have. You know, he feels like he'd be very approachable and easy to talk to. I mean, the guy's a pro, you know, so that's my big picture analysis.
Could we now hear from board members with concerns about candidate 2?
I'll chime in on one that's gonna be pretty general, and I'll admit to being a little hypocritical because I struggle with the same thing. The guy's a tad verbose, and his thoughts run away from him a little bit, although he did take the coaching and reined it in some, but, you know, it's, you know, never use 2 words if one will do. You know, which is something I struggle with too, so.
You're like the phrase master.
Yeah, the Reader's Digest did none of it or something.
No, it's,
Word of
okay,
the day.
this is dirty stuff. Harry Truman said that. I researched him, and so that's a Harry Truman quote.
He still remembered it though.
Concerns?
I like that he wants to keep the ship steady, but I was also concerned that there wasn't like a top priority, like, this is what we should do maybe first. Not just, let's just keep the boat afloat and keep going.
Yeah, I will kind of piggyback off of that, and I think, like, I heard that too and went, like, what's your thing? But then when he added to it for the, like, you know there are going to be issues with this high school expansion. That's gonna be, like, I feel like that was his answer to that question.
Sure.
But I also was kind of like, and then he added like, you know, let's get 1 or 2 easy quick wins. I was like, touche.
A little complacent there.
Yeah.
I also do think that Mr. Rice has a little bit of an advantage of being in the school and seeing like what can I change in a positive way. And I think he did a great job of answering the question. That was one of my strengths for him. But I do think wanting to just come in and say like, what do I see that could be beneficial to change is also something I was interested in if he was here for, you know, a time. But yes, I agree.
I think his answer to that too speaks to his experience. Like, I mean, he's done this before. Like, he knows what you can and cannot do when you step into that role. And so I'm back to positives. I appreciated that answer, but it was the right answer, and it's just a testament to, you know, the amount of reps that he's had doing this. So anyway,
I just spent out time. I'm probably gonna go more positive like you. I mean, he answered that in saying he's recognizing he doesn't want to come in and like completely rock the boat and make it a bad thing, but also, like, he talked his passion, like not wanting to stay in the same spot, and transition is what energizes him. So like the idea of the high school is why, even though I'm happy where I am, this opportunity to grow this high school sounds awesome. So that's how I kind of took that. So
And I took it the same way.
and he alluded to he's willing to do action items, but he's gonna come in and listen.
yeah.
And then address those action items to build trust. Then he can start moving forward more on his own, so.
I think my biggest concern, the things that he said, when he said that, you know, he was doing his research on us, and he would have to be intentional with the division of power with the other 2 admin. Like, I don't know that he has the experience working with other admin under him. Like, if, you know, the role that he's in, he does all of the jobs. And so my wonder is, what experience does he have with having other admin under him and being able to be an admin team and delegating control, letting go of control and power, and I know that's always tough. So that was kind of my wonder. I wouldn't say it's a negative, I would say it's a wonder.
Well, I mean, what you said, Shelby, does he have the opportunity to delegate power? I mean, is there, may not have anybody to do it, so he does it all himself.
Yeah.
So, I guess time would tell, really. I mean,
And I think if we do decide to bring either or both back for a second round tomorrow, like, that would be a question that now that I've had time to like read my notes over again.
For both candidates.
Yeah,
really.
like, how do you plan on working as an admin team and the delegation of powers, like what would that look like to you? So.
Concerns, Jonas?
I think they've all been covered.
Board members, you're at a place where you need to actually now rank the candidates. So you need to hear from each person which order you put them in, from most desirable to lesser desirable. Then you'll determine what you want to do tomorrow night.
I'll go first. I'll say for me right now, it's definitely Jonas for number one.
Same for me, Jonas 1, Nick 2.
Jonas 1, Nick 2, bring back Jonas.
Agreed.
I would agree, Jonas had a higher score for me, and I would like to bring him back to interview on the second.
Same for me.
Ditto.
I think we're unanimous.
Okay.
You guys want to bring anybody else back? Or?
No, I agree, should have said that. I agree with just bringing Jonas back.
All right, so,
same.
so
Yeah, and I
8 of
wanna-
you have ranked Jonas number 1. So you'd like to have one interview tomorrow?
Yes.
Yep, correct.
Affirmative.
And I'm gonna, I'll call candidates tonight, and let them know what's going on. We need to do 2 very quick things here. What time are we slotted? We slotted for 5:30, start 5:20. So we'd like to see Jonas from 5:30 to 6:30,
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay? And what questions, I'd like to put together another list of questions for you. You don't need to score or anything, but what questions would you like brought up based on what you think he can do for you? Any concerns you have and where you want to see him on board? You know, how does he, what kind of questions do you ask that'll put your mind at ease that he can actually come in and do the job the way you want it done?
Yeah.
What Shelby said about the power structure,
I
how he
agree.
would do that. And really a timeline for when he comes in, because that answer was just a little too vague for me. You can't sit in here, I'll use complacent again.
Is it,
Talking about the first 12-month plan?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's too long to,
Let me, so you bring up a great point. If he's your candidate, would you like me to give him these questions so he's able to prep a little bit for these? Or would you like just to ask them of him when he gets here?
I'd
Well,
like to
this
do
is
it.
live.
Yeah, he's
It's
gonna
live,
hear
so
it.
he's hearing these questions, I'm sure, you know, yeah,
Well, who knows if he's,
right, who knows, right, true.
No, but how do you lead leaders, I think, is a good one, and to Julie's point.
Mike, say it again?
You know, this question that's floating around is, you know, talk to us about how you would lead other leaders, you know, because that's what we think might be a new experience for him. And then, you know, a tighter, and I'm gonna pull a page out of corporate America, but we would call that a 30-60-90 plan.
Yeah.
And that's something that we do commonly with second interviews is, okay, you're in this job, tell us about the first 3 months.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think providing them to him tonight so that he has time, and I wouldn't expect him to be able to throw those things at us. What questions does he have for us would be a big one. Cause it needs to be the right fit for him too, just because it's the right fit for us, like, he didn't get a chance, neither he nor Nick got a chance to ask us questions, and like, I wanna make sure that we're the right fit for him, cause I don't want him to get here and go, oh, this isn't what I thought I was getting into.
Excellent point. It's, you know, and
How long?
honestly, those 3 are probably gonna be 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, there'll be a lot of follow-up.
That's what I mean, yeah.
It's a real
yeah,
conversation.
It'd be a big dialogue.
Well, if you're, go ahead, Ryan, pardon me.
It's okay. This is more for staff, like, I would like to know from him what is his ideal work environment.
I'm curious how long he would see himself in this position.
You said till he retired.
Yeah, when is that? 15 years, 10 years, or is he looking to retire in 2 years?
Oh.
Can we
I
bring
don't
that
think that's the case, but that's a heck of a question.
Yeah.
No, I don't either.
Could we call him on his offer and make a, I assume it
Phone
would be
call?
you, Bruce, but that phone call to the teacher tomorrow morning, that's on prep and?
No.
No, okay. Just thought I'd throw it out there.
What was your question?
Can we call the school and ask to talk to the teacher on?
Oh.
Like, take him up on
Just
it.
sit right there, pick it off the tree.
Do you want to ask him how he would infiltrate a bus though?
Can you run a SWAT team? I
Okay,
will
we
also,
repeat the ones
No, I
we
didn't
have, so I
yeah.
can reprocess them.
We also didn't do introductions.
how you work with the power structure and lead
We
other
should
leaders.
have, yeah.
Your timeline coming in for a 30, 60, 90-day plan. Questions for the board, ideal work environment, timeline of retirement. I will tell you that, again, his references were smoking. I mean, and I asked some people that have worked for great leaders and have been great leaders, and they just said this guy's got it all. So you've got a pretty polished person now. I think the second interview is really, is a fit there for you and for him.
Maybe this doesn't have to be a hard question, but I would like to at least have it brought up, the first year is gonna be crucial. And for me, divided attention, and what does that look like for him? Like, does he have any other professional responsibilities that are out there right now? I mean, is he a professor, is he a teacher, what's he doing? Like, I'd like to have his full focus at WLA for this first year. So if he does have any, is he willing to put them on hold, or what does that look like?
I do have another one too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Does he see it as feasible to be opening a school, opening up 9th grade next year?
Might need more info.
Yeah, I don't think, like, he wouldn't be able to, I don't think. He doesn't have a choice, like, we are moving forward with 9th grade, so I think it's part of, like, I think that decision has been made.
Shelby, did we vote on that?
I don't think so the last time I talked to Stephanie at BOA, I was under the understanding that it was not really an option for us to move, like, we had to move forward with either expanding up or down.
Board approval or not?
Yeah.
So VOA is.
In order to make our, like, grants and all of
You
those
just choose what
things.
floor you wanna go to? 9th or?
Parking lot.
Could we ask him how he would start to get the board ready for
Yes.
that?
Yeah.
That'd be
Because I think that's a
Yeah.
pretty big deal. Okay.
We should also do quick introductions with him tomorrow because
Mhm.
we did not do
I
that.
like that.
I have one more, just based off of the, like, staff and community feedback, trying to kind of get some answers for them. I don't wanna ask him why he would leave, because I think he kind of
Yeah.
touched on that
He
with
did.
us, but one of the things that stood out in my mind, and he talked a lot about how he connects with staff and how he connects with students, but what about the bigger community? And that was, I think, one of the concerns from our community is, what do you do to involve yourself with parents and, like, the whole community? So, I think that would be, to touch on other people's concerns too, since they don't get a second voice tomorrow.
I will, I'll make the calls, let both candidates know what's going on. If they don't already know, they'll know. I'll put together a new question sheet for you and have that available tomorrow evening. Should he be the person you're going to, we'll have a question at the end when he's not in the room, obviously, about whether or not you want to move forward. I recommend to boards that a new person coming in to lead needs a unanimous. And we'll have a discussion, and if you're not there, then we've got some more work to do, but politically, it's important, I think, to have a unanimous decision. I'm not suggesting that you abandon your own beliefs, your own experiences. Considering that, if he is successful and the group wants to move forward, the subcommittee has the contract laid out, the terms laid out, the salary range, I think you're all
Yeah,
really ready to
We're all
kickstart.
short up, ready to go.
Okay. Questions from anybody regarding the process so far or tomorrow evening?
Will I be able to just do roll call tomorrow?
Yeah, so I just can't, I have a prior commitment, so I can't be there tomorrow, so I'll just take notes from that later and do just
Okay.
a roll call.
Okay,
Thank you.
beautiful.
Thanks for all the help with this.
Yeah,
Brad.
and I
Yes,
can
thank
make
you.
the interview stuff and have this all ready for tomorrow too.
Thank you for wearing out the copy machine with the stuff that I sent.
And your legs on the tours and all of the things.
Cassidy, just one more thing I noticed on our building schedules, that this room is scheduled for PTO tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
I'll move it,
So we are back here then?
yeah, and that way it's all.
Thanks for that.
All right.
Yeah, it's,
Nice work,
you don't have to do
Hard
a different
work.
setup.
Thanks.
Hold on, I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
There's a motion and a second, is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed say no.
No.
Any